The United States is known as a land of the free. The American character is rooted in independence, in thought, belief, and daily life. Yet the foundations of the American character are now under assault by groups that believe in changing not just the surface policies, but to also rewrite the history of this country, present new values to replace its traditions, and to reform even its foundation, the American Constitution. Under the narrative that some forms of speech and belief are dangerous,
Facebook's oversight board has decided to uphold the site's suspension of former President Donald Trump.
there's now a push to regulate speech and suppress belief. Under the narrative that America is too violent, there's a push to eliminate the rights of citizens to own firearms. And there are similar pushes being made to change the fabric of this country, down to a dismantling of its monuments and demonizing of its founding stories. Behind these narratives, however, are socialist movements and political groups that have misrepresented not just the history of this country, but even the very fabric of its system of government. The ideas this country was founded on are now being warped and maligned to fit social agendas. America is more than just a nation. It represents an idea. And what would it mean for the world if that idea was lost? The American story was once seen as a message for the United States to promote. It was the idea that people, when given freedom, can create a prosperous and harmonious society. It was the shining city on the hill, with its message of freedom being an example for other nations to aspire towards.
And as we pray God, they always will, that another generation of Americans has protected and passed on lovingly this place called America, this shining city on a hill, this government of, by, and for the people.
The American story is now being attacked by groups and powers holding that freedom itself is a danger, and that government should more finely regulate the lives of each person to ensure social harmony. This conflict isn't new, however. It goes back to the time of America's founding, when the Age of Kings was coming to an end and people around the world were looking for what type of government could replace it, while finding the place of religion and tradition also in that new age. In 1776, the American founding fathers established one of these ideas, with a statement in the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They established a government based on the idea that people's rights are given to them by God, and that government is only instituted among men to protect these rights. This led to the creation of one of the most prosperous nations in the history of the world, with its foundations in individual freedom.
They had such idealist ideas that when in the Declaration, when they said, all men are created equal, and that's the assumption in the Constitution. It's very hard to believe that people anywhere else believe that. Not so much on race, but on class. Whether they're Calvinistic, that if you're wealthy, you were either more devout or you were blessed by God, or your family genetically they didn't know much about genes, but they knew a lot what they call bloodline. So wealthy people were just superior people. But this idea that you were going to have land and anybody could come anywhere and become an American, that was a very radical idea.
The beauty of the Declaration of Independence is God used these flawed men to put together these amazing principles that ultimately, not only did they launch the greatest nation in the history of the world, but it was the Declaration principles that Abraham Lincoln would stand upon for the Emancipation Proclamation. It was the Declaration of Independence principles written by Thomas Jefferson all those years ago that the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. would march in the streets and recite over and over and over again.
Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
So they put in place the formula, even though it took time, that ultimately then would produce the freest, most powerful, most benevolent nation in the history of the world. What they changed that other people had ignored in the laws of nature and nature's God was the fact that individuals were endowed by our Creator with these unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and others. They said among these, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But they began with this idea of truth, and and that began with the idea that these freedoms come from God, not from government, and the whole reason we're gathering together to create a government is to protect the rights that God gave you.
Now, just several years later, after the American Founding Fathers signed the U.S. Constitution in 1787, a very different system emerged in France, where the Jacobin leaders of the French Revolution established the idea, in 1793, that alongside the destruction of the Age of Kings, that God should also be abandoned. Under the new government, the Committee of Public Safety, they accumulated all power to a central government authority, established a state-run atheist cult of reason, and launched the Reign of Terror, to put to the guillotine all who opposed them. This idea of brutal suppression in the name of the greater good, of eliminating tradition and belief, and of holding a single centralized power of government that could control the lives of each individual, would lead to the ideas of communism and its system of socialism that would eventually sweep the world. And through history leading up until today, these two competing ideas of freedom and socialism have been at the heart of arguments on the role of government and the place of citizens. This has led to many attacks on the American character in attempts to demonize not just our history, but even the founding principles of this country. Yet who are the groups leading this charge against America?
So you have a situation where this Constitution has protected Americans' rights for 200 years. Their right to free speech, to assembly, their right to keep and bear arms, their protection from seizure of their assets, unlawful searches, unreasonable searches. It's given the American people more freedom than anybody has enjoyed in world history, and consequently more prosperity than anybody has enjoyed in American history. But it has stopped tyrants gaining power. And so the Constitution is the enemy of all tyrants. So every tyrant in America right now, from the radical left to the globalists to big tech to the Communist Party of China, are all trying to destroy the US Constitution. Because if they can do that, they have complete power over every aspect of our lives. That's their dream, and that's our nightmare. The left has tried to demonize America. It's tried to propagandize against this country, to create racial division here, to use the fifth column, the communists within this country, to create as many problems as they can. So America has to be destroyed. It has to be destroyed morally. It has to be destroyed through propaganda and even physically, because America is the example of what people could be, of what freedom can look like, of the prosperity, the creativity that is unleashed when you have a free society. The American people, in my experience, are the most benevolent people, the kindest people, and the most tolerant people that exist on the planet. But they're also a little bit naive and a little bit complacent, and they think it's all going to go on forever, and they do not understand that every evil dictator on the planet is working overtime to bring this country to its knees.